The folded program felt heavier than paper should feel. I held it under the tablecloth, out of sight. My thumb pressed into the crease where my own name sat printed in bold serif letters. Keynote speaker. Grace Halden, Denver Metro Emergency Logistics Coalition. 6 feet away, under the chandelier light, my brother Trevor sat in my assigned chair, front and center. His dress uniform pressed so sharp, it looked laminated. My mother leaned toward him, adjusting his collar like he was going to prom. I was sitting in a folding chair by the service doors, where the waitstaff kept swinging trays past my shoulder. Cold air leaking in every time someone pushed through to the kitchen. Linda had walked me there herself 20 minutes earlier, her hand light on my elbow, her voice pitched low so only I could hear it. "He deserves the family spotlight tonight, Grace," she'd said. "You know how to manage things quietly. That's your gift." I hadn't said anything back. I just let her lead me to the chair, because some part of me was still doing the math on how the night was supposed to go, and the math wasn't adding up yet. It would. In about 4 minutes, a coordinator named Asha was going to walk to the podium with a microphone and read my name off that same program. And my mother was going to have to watch my brother stand up out of my seat. If you have ever been moved out of your own place at your own table, tell me where you were sitting when it happened. I want to know I am not the only one who has done the math in a folding chair. My name is Grace Halden. I am 31 years old. I live in Denver, and for 6 years I have worked as a disaster response logistics planner, which mostly means I am the person nobody remembers exists until the water is rising and someone needs to know which roads are still open. That night, at the Rocky Mountain Regional Emergency Management Awards dinner, I was being honored for something specific. Coordinating the evacuation of 1,100 people out of Larkspur Hollow during the flash flood that took out the county bridge in April. I had spent 4 days on maybe 6 hours of sleep, routing buses around, washed out roads, calling in a second staging area when the first one flooded, keeping a paper map taped to a gymnasium wall because the cell towers went down twice. Nobody in Larkspur Hollow died. That was the whole point of me being in that ballroom in the first place. But to understand how I ended up folded into a chair by the kitchen, doors, while my brother sat in my seat wearing a uniform for a job he'd held 8 months. You have to understand what it was like being Linda Halden's daughter for 31 years. The suffering, if I can call it that without sounding dramatic, was never one big cruelty. It was 100 small ones, each with its own object, each one small. Enough that if I complained about it alone, I'd sound petty. It's only when you line them up that you can see the shape of it. The first object was a wooden spoon. I was 9, Trevor was 6, and my mother kept a wooden spoon on the kitchen counter that she used to point instead of to cook, mostly aimed at whichever one of us she was mid-sentence with. She used it to point at my report card once, at a 94 in math, and say, "That's nice, Grace, but did you see Trevor's drawing from school? Come look at Trevor's drawing." I stood in the doorway, holding my report card, while she taped a stick figure family to the refrigerator. And something in me quietly filed the fact away. My numbers were nice, his crayon marks were news. The second object was a photo album, the physical kind, with plastic sleeves that yellowed at the edges. When I was 12, I found the album in the hallway closet and flipped through it, looking for pictures of my own birthday parties. There were 4 pages of Trevor's t-ball games, his gap-toothed grins, his trophies lined up like a shelf. There was one photo of me at my middle school science fair, blurry, taken from too far away. Like whoever held the camera had been reaching for something else and caught me by accident. The third object was a phone, decades later.
The night before the awards dinner.
My mother called me while I was ironing my blazer, and she said, I saw the seating chart online, sweetheart, and I had a thought. I said, okay.
She said, Trevor's uniform is going to photograph so well up front.
Would you mind terribly if we shuffled things around just for the pictures? I told her I'd been assigned that seat for a reason, that it wasn't really something to shuffle. She laughed, a small, tired laugh, and said, "It's just seating, Grace. You always make everything into a project." The fourth object was a cocktail napkin. I saw it later, tucked half under a centerpiece at the registration table. My mother's handwriting scrawled across it in blue pen. Trevor, front near stage. Grace, by doors, fine there, doesn't mind. She had written that I didn't mind before she'd even asked me. She'd decided my consent in advance and left it on a napkin like a grocery list. The fifth object was my father's cufflinks. Martin Halden has never once, in my memory, raised his voice at my mother, and that night was no different. He stood near the bar in his good gray suit, turning one cufflink around and around with 2 fingers. Not looking at me directly when Linda steered me toward the folding chair. I caught his eye for half a second. He gave me a small, helpless shrug, the kind that says, "I see this, and I am not going to do anything about it." And then he looked back down at his drink. I had seen that shrug my whole childhood. It used to make me feel invisible. That night, it mostly made me feel tired. The sixth object was Trevor's dress uniform itself, the ribbons pinned slightly crooked on the left side. Because he'd asked our mother to help him get ready in the hotel room, and she'd fussed over the alignment for 20 minutes like it was a wedding gown. Trevor is a good person, underneath all of this. He's a firefighter, 8 months into the job, proud of it in the uncomplicated way you're proud of something new. He didn't ask to sit in my chair. But he didn't ask not to either, and that's its own kind of object to carry. The seventh thing, and this is the one that finally made something in me go quiet and cold instead of hurt, was the seating chart itself. Printed on cardstock and displayed on an easel near the ballroom entrance. I'd checked it 3 days earlier when Asha, the event coordinator, emailed me the run of show. Table 1, seat 2, Grace Halden, keynote speaker. I'd taken a screenshot without even thinking about it, the way you screenshot a flight confirmation. Just habit, from a job where you learn that paper trails save lives, and sometimes save you too. When I walked into that ballroom that night and saw a different name card, at seat 2, Trevor Halden, Denver Fire Rescue. Printed in the same calligraphy font, I didn't say anything right away. I just stood there in my navy dress, holding my clutch, feeling my mother's hand land on my elbow, like she'd been waiting for me at the door specifically to redirect me before I got close enough to read the card myself. "There you are," Linda said, too brightly. "Come on, I found you a spot. It's actually got a nice view of the stage." That was the moment the pleading instinct in me finally burned all the way down, and something colder took its place. I want to be honest about what that felt like, because I think people imagine confrontation as a hot thing, all shouting and tears, and for me, it was the opposite. It was like stepping into cold water on purpose. I stopped feeling the urge to explain myself to my mother. I stopped rehearsing the sentence where I'd say, "Mom, that's actually my assigned seat. I'm supposed to be up front." Instead, I started counting. I counted the printed program in my clutch, the one Asha had emailed me a PDF of 2 weeks earlier, the one with my name on the inside flap, next to a small paragraph about Larkspur Hollow. I counted the speaker contract I'd signed in June,
The one that specified my name, my session time, and a modest honorarium. Sitting in a folder in my email right now on my phone. I counted the seating chart screenshot, timestamped 3 days before this dinner. I counted the coordinator's own event notes, which I'd seen in a shared document, listing me under Program Keynote with a runtime of 8 minutes. None of that was pleading. That was documentation. And once I started counting instead of hoping, the folding chair by the service doors didn't feel like humiliation anymore. It felt like a fact waiting to be corrected by someone other than me. "I'm fine here," I told my mother, and I meant it in a way. That clearly unsettled her, because she'd expected at least a little friction. A little visible hurt she could smooth over, and then privately resent me for causing. "You're a good sport," she said, patting my shoulder, and went back to Trevor's table to fix his tie again. I sat by the doors and ate a roll I didn't want and watched the room fill up. Emergency managers from 4 counties, a state senator's aide, 2 fire chiefs, a woman from FEMA regional office, who I recognized from a conference in Salt Lake the year before. Round tables dressed in white cloth, a small stage at the front with a podium and a single standing microphone. A screen behind it that would later show a photograph of the Larkspur Hollow Gymnasium, cots lined up in rows. My hand-drawn evacuation map still taped crooked to the wall in the corner of the frame. Asha found me about 10 minutes before the program started. She had a headset looped around her neck and a clipboard she carried like a shield, and she'd clearly been looking for me because she came straight over, weaving between tables, her heels clicking fast on the hardwood. "Grace, there you are. I've been looking everywhere," she said. "You're not at your table. Table 1, seat 2. That's you, right? I need to walk you through timing before we start." There was a seating change, I said. My mother moved things around. Asha's eyebrows went up, and I watched her professional composure do a very fast recalculation. "A seating change," she repeated. "For the keynote speaker's seat?" "For photos," I said. "My brother's in uniform." She looked at me for a second, like she was deciding whether I was joking, and then she looked over at table 1. At Trevor sitting there, adjusting his collar under the light, at my mother beaming at him like a woman watching her son graduate. "Okay," Asha said slowly. "Well, that's not going to change what happens at 7:40, because the program's already printed and I'm reading directly off it. But I want to make sure you're near the stage when I call you, because I am not walking down to the kitchen doors with a live mic in my hand." "I'll be ready," I said. "You have your remarks?" I patted my clutch. Where the folded program sat next to a single printed page of talking points, I'd trimmed down to under 8 minutes, 3 separate times. "I have everything." She squeezed my arm once. Quick, professional. The kind of gesture you give someone you respect and don't have time to fully reassure. "For what it's worth," she said, "I read your coordinator notes from April. The gymnasium thing. That's the reason this room is full tonight. I'll see you at the podium." She walked off toward the sound booth, and I sat back down in the folding chair. And for the first time all evening, I felt something other than cold calculation. I felt something almost like relief, the specific relief of being seen by someone who had no reason to lie about it. Dinner service wound down. Plates were cleared, coffee poured, the room's noise settling into that particular hum of an audience getting ready to be quiet. My mother came by my chair once more before the program started, crouching slightly so she could speak to me at eye level. The way you'd speak to a child at a party who needed managing. "You looked a little tense over here," she said. "I hope you're not upset about the seats." "It's not a big deal in the grand scheme, Grace." Trevor's had such a hard year finding his footing, and this is a nice moment for him. You've always had your own thing going. You don't need the room the way he does. I don't need the room, I agreed. She smiled, satisfied, like she'd won an argument I hadn't been having. That's my girl, she said, and went back to her seat. And I let her have that small victory, because I knew exactly how short it was going to last. At 7:40, the lights dimmed slightly, and Asha walked to the podium with her clipboard and the microphone she'd unclipped from her headset. The room quieted, the way rooms do when they're trained to expect an award. My father, from where I could see him at table 1, straightened slightly in his chair. Trevor reached for his water glass. My mother folded her hands in her lap and watched the stage with the pleased, ready expression of a woman about to watch her son be recognized for sitting in the right chair. Good evening, everyone, Asha said. Before we close out the evening, I want to introduce tonight's keynote speaker. In April of this year, when the flash flood came through Larkspur Hollow and took out the county bridge, this next speaker was the logistics coordinator who rerouted 1,100 residents to safety over 4 days with no loss of life. Using a paper map and a satellite phone when the cell network failed twice. She built a second staging area from scratch in 6 hours when the first one flooded. I've read her after-action report. It should be taught in a classroom somewhere. Please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, Grace Holden. There was a pause in the room. The specific pause of 150 people looking at an empty seat at table 1, at a man in a dress uniform who was clearly not about to stand up, and then heads slowly turning, searching, until they found me at a folding chair by the service doors, in a navy dress, holding a clutch with a folded program inside it. I stood up. I want to describe exactly what that felt like, because it wasn't triumphant in the way movies make these moments look. It was quiet. It was just me, standing, smoothing my dress once, and walking the length of that ballroom past every table, past the state senator's aide, past the FEMA woman from Salt Lake, past my mother's face doing something complicated and fast. Past my brother, half rising out of my chair, like his body had understood the situation a half second before his mind did. If you've ever had to walk the long way to claim something that was already yours, drop a comment. I read every one, and I think a lot of us have made that same walk at least once. Trevor stood up fully as I passed, and for a second, our eyes met. And I saw something in his face that wasn't quite guilt yet, more like confusion trying to become guilt. He didn't say anything. He just stepped back from the chair, my chair, and I kept walking toward the stage. I want to be clear that I didn't storm up there. I didn't throw a look at my mother. I didn't pause for a dramatic beat in front of her table. I walked the way I walk into a command post during an active flood warning, which is to say, briskly, with my eyes on the destination and not on the noise around me. Asha handed me the microphone at the podium with a small nod, and she stepped to the side. And I looked out at a room of 150 people. My mother somewhere in the middle of them with her hand pressed flat against her chest, like she was trying to hold something in place. Thank you, I said. I'll keep this to 8 minutes because that's what's on the program, and I've learned the hard way that programs matter. There was a small ripple of laughter, the kind that comes from people who don't fully understand the joke but recognize the shape of one. I told them about Larkspur Hollow. I told them about the bridge going out at 2 a.m. and the first call coming in from a county dispatcher whose voice was shaking. I told them about the gymnasium, about taping a paper map to a cinder block wall because the digital system had gone down with the second cell tower. About the moment I realized the first staging area was going to flood too, and we had 90 minutes to move 600 people to higher ground before dark. I told them about a school bus driver named Ruth, who made 14 runs in a row without stopping to eat, and a National Guard sergeant who found us a second radio when ours died. And I told them that none of it worked because of any one person. It worked because everybody in that gymnasium did their job and trusted that someone else was doing theirs. I did not mention my mother. I did not mention the folding chair. I let the room draw its own conclusions from the seating chart it had just watched play out in real time. And rooms are usually smarter than people give them credit for. When I finished, the applause went on longer than 8 minutes worth of remarks usually earns. And I stepped down from the podium, and Asha met me at the base of the small stairs with the plaque in her hands. The one that had been sitting on a side table the whole night, engraved with my name, which somebody, presumably my mother, had managed not to notice, or had noticed and decided not to mention. I walked back toward my table, back toward my mother's face, back toward Trevor, who was now standing awkwardly near table 1 with his hands in his pockets, no longer sure whether he was supposed to sit down again or stay standing. My mother recovered fast, I'll give her that. She's always been good at recovering fast in front of an audience. "Grace, honey," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear, standing up and reaching for my arm like she was going to pull me into a hug for the room's benefit. "Why on earth didn't you tell us? We would have made sure you had the best seat in the house." That was the counterattack, dressed up as warmth. I recognized it immediately because I'd been on the receiving end of that particular move for 3 decades. Turn the humiliation into a misunderstanding. Turn the misunderstanding into my failure to communicate, and let everyone at table 1 silently agree that if only Grace had spoken up sooner, none of this would have happened. "I did tell you," I said, keeping my voice level, keeping it for the room, not for her. "I told you on the phone last night that the seat was assigned for a reason. You said it was just seating. Well, I didn't know it was for the Keynote," she said, and her voice had an edge now, quiet but sharp. The edge she used to use on me in the kitchen when I was 9, holding a report card. "You never tell us anything about your work, Grace. You keep it all so quiet. How are we supposed to know you were the one being honored?" "It was on the seating chart," Asha said. I hadn't realized Asha had followed me back from the stage, clipboard still in hand, but there she was, standing a polite half step behind my shoulder. And she said it plainly, without heat, the way you'd correct a misprint. "Table 1, seat 2, Grace Halden, keynote speaker. It's been posted at the registration table since 5 o'clock. I also have the speaker contract on file if there's any confusion, and the run of show document lists her session at 7:40 specifically. I can email it to anyone who'd like to see it." That was the decisive, factual blow. And I noticed it land the way a factual blow always lands in a room like that. Quietly, without any raised voices. Just a slight stiffening in my mother's shoulders, and a slight softening in everyone else's faces. The recalibration of 150 people deciding almost simultaneously whose version of the evening to believe. My mother didn't have a response to a printed contract. She has never once, in my experience, had a response to a printed contract. She's excellent at managing feelings in a room, redirecting attention, softening hard edges with warmth. But she has no tools for a document with a date and a signature on it, because documents don't care how good someone photographs. "Well," she said finally, in a smaller voice than she'd used a minute before, "I just wanted tonight to be special for both of you. It was special, I said. I gave the keynote. Trevor stepped forward then, and I want to give him credit for this part. Because it would have been easy for him to stay quiet and let the moment pass. Instead, he pulled the chair, my chair, back a little from the table, an almost formal gesture, like he was returning something borrowed. "Grace, I didn't know," he said. "Mom said it was fine. She said you'd already agreed to it." "I should have asked you myself before I sat down." "You should have," I said, not unkindly. "But I know you didn't set this up." "I'll fix it," he said, and pulled out the seat, standing beside it like an usher. I didn't sit down right away. I looked at my father instead, who was still turning his cufflink, still not quite meeting my eyes. And I thought about the 9-year-old with the report card and the 12-year-old with the photo album. And I decided I was done waiting for him to say something on his own. "Dad," I said, "did you know I was the keynote?" He looked up, and for a second I saw something genuine in his face. Something like shame that he hadn't earned the right to show yet. "I knew," he said quietly. "I saw the program when we picked it up at registration. I should have said something to your mother right then." "Why didn't you?" "Because it's easier not to," he said. And at least he had the decency to sound like he knew that wasn't a good enough answer. I sat down in my chair, finally, at table 1, in the seat that had been mine on paper since June. And I set the folded program on the tablecloth in front of me, not hiding it under the table anymore, just letting it sit there in plain view. My name printed on the front where anyone walking past could read it. The rest of the dinner finished the way these dinners finish, with a few more short speeches, a slideshow of photographs from various incidents around the region, polite applause, the low scrape of chairs as people started gathering coats and purses. My mother didn't say much else to me directly. She spent most of the remaining time talking to the women at the next table over, her voice a little too bright, a little too fast. The particular performance of someone trying to convince a room that nothing uncomfortable had just happened in it. When the evening ended, we all ended up in the hotel elevator together. My mother, my father, Trevor, and me. Riding up to the rooms the venue had blocked out for out-of-town family. Nobody spoke for the first few floors. The numbers ticked up in red light above the door. It was Trevor who finally broke it, turning to face me directly instead of the doors. "I'm sorry," he said. "For real." I should have looked at the seating chart before I sat down. I should have asked why my name was on a card that wasn't mine to begin with. I just wanted Mom to be proud of the uniform, I guess. And I didn't think about what it was costing you to make room for that. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. Because an apology that names the specific thing it's apologizing for is worth more than most apologies I'd gotten from that family in 31 years combined. My mother stayed quiet through all of it, looking at the numbers above the door like they required her full attention, and I let her have the silence. Because I wasn't interested in extracting an apology from her in an elevator with a captive audience. Some people need privacy to be honest, and some people just need an audience to avoid it. And I'd learned a long time ago which category my mother belonged to. The doors opened on my father's floor first, and he stepped out, then turned. Back before the doors could close, one hand braced against the frame. "Grace," he said, "would you send me a copy of your speech? The whole thing. Not just what I remember from tonight. I'd like to read it properly. And keep it, if that's all right. I don't have much of your work written down anywhere." It wasn't a big ask. It wasn't an apology for 31 years of small shrugs and cufflinks and looking away. But it was something specific and true. A real request instead of a vague gesture. And coming from my father. That was as close to unequal repair as I was going to get. Night, and I decided it was enough to accept without asking for more. "I'll email it to you tomorrow," I said, and he nodded, and the doors closed. And it was just me and my mother and Trevor left, riding up in that quiet metal box, the numbers still climbing. My mother finally spoke as the elevator slowed for her floor. "I hope you know I'm proud of you too," she said, not quite looking at me, adjusting the strap of her clutch like it needed adjusting. "I just thought Trevor needed the moment more than you did tonight." I thought about the wooden spoon and the photo album and the cocktail napkin with my consent written on it before I'd given it. And I decided that wasn't the elevator for that conversation either. Some things you save for daylight, if you decide to have them at all. "I know, Mom," I said, which wasn't agreement, just acknowledgement, and she seemed to take it as enough. Because she stepped off at her floor with a small wave and didn't look back to see if I waved too. I didn't. That was 3 weeks ago now. I flew back to Denver the next morning with the plaque wrapped in a hotel towel in my checked bag and the folded program still in my clutch, a little more creased than it had been. One corner soft from being handled too many times during a night that had asked a lot of a single piece of paper. I keep a go bag by my front door, the way you'd expect someone in my line of work to. It's not glamorous, just a duffel with a change of clothes, a flashlight, a paper map of 3 counties I've worked in most, a portable charger, protein bars that have probably expired twice over without me noticing, and a small waterproof folder where I keep documents that matter more than they look like they should. My speaker contract from that night is in there now, next to my emergency contact card and a laminated copy of the Larkspur Hollow evacuation route. And folded into that same waterproof pocket, pressed flat under a rubber band because the crease had started to tear, is the program from the awards dinner. My name still printed clearly on the front in that bold serif font, Keynote speaker, Grace Halden. I didn't put it there to relive the humiliation of a folding chair by the service doors, or the particular sting of my mother's hand, light on my elbow, steering me away from my own seat. I put it there because that program is proof of something I used to have trouble believing on my own. On nights when the work was hard and nobody was watching, and it would have been easy to wonder if any of it mattered to the people whose opinion I used to want most. It matters. It's printed. It has a date on it, and a name, and a room full of 150 witnesses. And it doesn't need my mother's approval to be true. Trevor called me last week, just to talk. No occasion attached to it, which is new for us. He asked about the flood work. Actual questions. Not polite ones. My father sent me a short message a few days after I emailed him the speech, just 3 lines, saying he'd read it twice and that he was going to keep a printed copy in his desk. My mother hasn't brought up the dinner again, and I haven't pushed her to. I don't know if she ever will, and I've stopped waiting on that particular corner of the map to resolve itself. If someone in your family has ever needed a room full of strangers to see what they wouldn't, tell me about it below. I'd like to know I'm not the only one who needed a program with my own name printed on it before anyone at home believed the work was real. Some evenings, when I'm packing for a deployment, checking the go bag before I head out to wherever the next flood or fire or storm needs a logistics plan built in real time, I unzip that waterproof folder just to make sure everything's still there, the way you check a lock twice, even when you know it's locked. My fingers pass over the contract, the laminated map, the emergency contacts, and then the folded program, soft at the corners now, my name still legible under the rubber band. I don't need it to prove anything to my mother anymore. I need it because on the nights when the work is hardest, when I'm running on no sleep and a bad radio signal and a map taped crooked to somebody's gymnasium wall, it helps to remember that I have already stood at a podium once and had a room stand up when they heard what I'd done, whether or not the people at my own table understood at first. Before you go, if this story felt familiar, share it with someone who needs to hear that the room can see you even when your own family doesn't. And tell me in the comments, what's the one object you'd keep in your own bag? The thing that proves the truth when nobody else in the room will say it out loud. I zip the folder shut, I zip the bag, and I set it by the door, ready for whenever the call comes in.